So the question for us is, we know that the self-control mindset, we know that the misbehavior, the command and compliance mindset is very, very damaging for us as much as for the kid. The question is, how do we become mindful? For Herb, mindfulness is becoming aware of what you do mindlessly. That got picked up in a big way by Dan Siegel. So when Dan Siegel talks about going on autopilot, that's an idea that he took from Langer. And what he wants us to do through his exercises, which do work, is get us off autopilot. What we do in self-reg is the same thing. So we talk about hitting the pause button. We need parents or teachers to hit the pause button, ask why now. The problem is that it's one thing to ask that question, it's another thing to know how to answer it. So the question is a very important question, but without a self-reg foundation, you won't get anywhere. You just spin, I don't know. Why is he doing this? I had a kid this morning, my son this morning came up with a dozen reasons why he wouldn't get out of bed. He's supposed to be in a college training conditioning program. And so, you know, my immediate thought this morning was he's a lazy SOB. And I had a problem, and the problem was Colleen had sent me 16 messages saying, you must be here by, and he was supposed to be at the Evinrude Center, which is in town, and I had perfect timing, and he won't get out of bed. And so, you know, I went straight into anger and anxiety because I was going to be late. And then, fortunately, I remembered what I do for a living. And of course, what was going on was classic avoidance behavior, right? So yeah, this is really tough. And so then I went back up and I changed everything. And you know, I tried threats, I had tried bribes. And he's now, I'm not making this stuff up. He's literally in bed with the covers over his head. So, and he's a big kid. So this time I came back into his room and I brought my tone of voice down. I sat on his bed and stroked his leg. And he's a 14-and-a-half-year-old. So you wouldn't think he would let you stroke his leg, right? But you could see the cover slowly coming down. So all I said to him was, so it's pretty tough, eh? And then, okay, so that released the floodgates, and then he starts to tell, the first thing he says, you couldn't do it, which is true. But, you know, it was a very interesting example because I hadn't done anything for him by trying to force this. And what he needed all he needed, by the way, he is now at the hockey camp, which is very interesting, right? What he needed was, he needed to say, you know what, this is really tough. And I'm scared, and he's the youngest by 3 or 4 years. So it's a rough experience for him. And he's playing for a team next year that insisted he go to it. So not my fault. And just being able to tell me, instead of me trying to force it, was all he needed to get out of bed and reluctantly go. So I'm getting the cue to do the self-reg view. Okay, so what we're trying to do in self-reg is both narrower, this is something I wrote about a while ago. It's both narrower and broader than all of the 5 definitions that we've looked at. It's narrower because our focus is on stress. Our focus is on what Jackie said. Our focus is on what are the stressors, and we want to broaden what she was saying so that we look at all 5 of our domains of stress. If you think about the baby Melanie case, that was according to the classic science that was done in self-regulation by Porges, by Greenspan. The other 4 domains are utterly irrelevant. We're not, you know, we're looking at a 9-month-old, so we're not interested in this case with you know, pro-social stress. Maybe with the parent, but which is an important fact, by the way, not a joke. I'll come back to it in a sec. The point is that the point is that we have to have a much, in self-reg, what we're looking for is a much deeper and a much broader understanding of the different kinds of stress. And when Susan says that I'm always learning, that's what I'm learning. What I'm learning is I'm constantly looking for what are the newest discoveries that like how could I take this experience and how many stresses could I identify you guys are in right now? Because one of the things I've noticed is that 50% of you have your head in your hands, which is a sign of stress, right? It's trying to relieve the stress load. And how could I redesign this room? How can, Susan's been very good at this, right? Like figuring out, because this is a very intense experience, the Self-Reg Symposium, how do you make it fun? How do you make it restorative? What do you build in so that you can recover from an hour with Stuart? So we're narrower. Our definition of mindfulness is narrower because we're focused on stress. We're focused on becoming aware of what those stresses are. But we're also broader. And it's the broad part that I think is critical. We're broader because the classic definition of mindfulness is very solipsistic. So if you don't know what solipsism is, look it up. Go back to that original picture we have with the Dalai Lama quote. Think of all of the images you've ever seen of meditation. It's always the monk sitting on a mountain. In that picture that we had, it's the little girl on her own. She's totally alone in nature and she's meditating and she's calm. So it's solipsistic because the idea is that as an individual, you are this isolated organism buffeted by stress. And you have to acquire these mindfulness skills so that you can cope with your stress. And self-reg repudiates that because the crux of self-reg is the interbrain. The crux of self-reg is Porges' theory of social engagement, Greenspan's work on attachment, the importance of the relationship. We look at that mind-to-mind, brain-to-brain hookup as the first line of defense against stress. So in classic mindfulness, it's, we want the kid to come into themselves, to turn in isolation and figure out, how do I calm my mind? But in self-reg, what we want is we want that child connecting with a teacher, with a parent, with another child. We want that bond because we know that bond is the most effective strategy that we have for dealing with stress. When we get pushed back to that, when we get pushed past that, then we're into ancient self-protective mechanisms. In Betty's prayer, the thing that really struck me was after every piece that she was grateful for, she came back to the line that, I can't remember the exact words, but one and all together. It was this idea of I found that very interesting. This is what, well, I don't want to go off on a political jag, but I think it's what happened in Canada in our last election, this rediscovery of the importance of communal stress management, of strategies that work instead of, I talk about it, instead of mindfulness is me-centered, for us, mindfulness is we-centered. Okay, so what does that mean? Okay, so I'll give myself 2 minutes. Can I have 5 more minutes? Okay, so let me just explain what it means. In classic mindfulness, they talk about looking non-judgmentally at what's going on inside your mind. In self-reg, we look non-judgmentally at what's going on in the other's mind as well as in our own mind. I have to become aware not just of what's going on in me, but what's going on in you. I have to know what you're feeling and thinking. I have to know what effect my thoughts are having on you, my tone of voice is having on you. I have to become aware of the interbreak that's going on between us. What happens when we do this, and I believe that this is the secret to our survival as a species, what happens when we do this is that there is a shared state of calmness. That's what we're striving for. That's why we have our last talk about self-reg havens. It has to be that we all experience this, that I as a teacher, I as a parent, am in the same mental space as you. That's what the child resonates with. And I resonate with it in the child, and it goes back and forth, back and forth. So we have some slides on this explaining this idea, but that's the fundamental point. How do you do it? Well, that depends, right? So now what we're going to say is, we're going to say that you have to find it as with your own class, with your own school, with your own family. You have to find what works for you. This is a lifelong journey, right? You're constantly deepening your understanding. And it's constantly changing. Your family's needs are changing. Your needs are changing. So what worked last year doesn't work this year. Last year, we all went up to Stony and we rented a cottage and it was fabulous. This year, the kids are too old. They don't want to spend a week with mom and dad. Okay, we need something, we need to evolve this. But to do that, we need to have the 5 steps of self-reg. That's our foundation for doing this. So what is self-reg? Well, self-reg is mindfulness. That's what it is. It's a mindfulness based on dyadic experiences.